In this video, we're going to take a look at section 4.4, which is factoring trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. So remember, trinomials, these are polynomials that have three terms. Now, what makes this trinomial special is our coefficient for our x squared is 1. There's no number in front of our x squared. So when we have a trinomial of this form, x squared plus bx plus c, this is going to factor into x plus m times x plus n. So it's going to factor into two binomials. Now, m plus n has to be equal to b, and m times n has to be equal to c. So when I multiply these two numbers with each other, it has to be equal to this last term. And when I add them together, it has to be equal to this middle term. Let's take a look at an example. So we want to factor out x squared plus 5x plus 6. So what we need is factors of 6. So two numbers that multiply to give us 6. And then we add them together, it has to be equal to 5. So let's go ahead, let's try out. So 1 and 6. So 1 times 6 gives me the 6, but 1 plus 6 gives me 7, which is not the right combination we're looking for. But there's some other numbers that multiply to give us a 6. For example, 2 and 3. 2 times 3 gives me 6, and now 2 plus 3 gives me 5, which is exactly the combination I'm looking for. So x squared plus 5x plus 6, this factors into x plus 2 times x plus 3. And now we factored out this trinomial. And remember, whenever you want to check your solution, you could always multiply it back out. So if I go ahead and multiply this out, so I have x times x and then x times 3. So I'm going to distribute out that x. So this gives me x squared plus 3x. And I'll take the 2 and distribute that out. So 2 times x, I get 2x, and 2 times 3, I get 6. And now I can combine like terms, I get x squared plus 5x plus 6, which is exactly what I started off with. So with all these factoring problems, you could always check your solution by multiplying back out. So what we did over here is we checked it. Let's take a look at another problem. So factor y squared plus 7y plus 10. So now we need two numbers that multiply to give us 10, and then the sum has to be equal to 7. So two numbers that multiply to give us 10, we could use 1 and 10, but if I add those together, it gives me 11. I could also use 2 and 5, and if I add those together, it gives me 7, which is exactly the combination I'm looking for. So this factors into y plus 2 times y plus 5. Now with these factors, it doesn't matter which order you put them in. You could put it as y plus 5 first, and then the y plus 2 after that. Either way, it's still the same answer. Since we're multiplying factors, it doesn't matter which order the factors are in. So for example, 2 times 3, this is the same as 3 times 2. So it doesn't matter which order they are in. Let's take a look at this next example. Now in this particular case, the trinomial that's given to us looks a little bit off just because it's not written in the correct order. So let's begin by rewriting it in descending order. So we have t squared minus 11t plus 24. Okay, now we are looking for factors of 24. So two numbers that multiply to give us 24. And then the sum here has to be equal to negative 11. So two numbers that multiply to 24 and then add up to negative 11. Okay, so let's try to work this out. So two numbers multiply to 24, let's say 3 and 8. So 3 times 8 gives me 24. But if I add them together, it gives me positive 11. Well, this is an easy fix because I could use now negative 3 and negative 8. Negative 3 times negative 8, so negative times a negative, it gives me positive. So negative 3 times negative 8, that gives me positive 24. If I add them together, it gives me negative 11. which is the combination we're looking for. And now we could go ahead and factor this out. We get t minus 3 and t minus 8. Now we have that trinomial factored out. Okay, next example. We have 2x cubed minus 2x squared minus 84x. Let me go ahead and rewrite the problem. So now it's not really in that form that we've seen so far where it's something squared and then plus, say like it's not like in the form like x squared then plus like say 3x and then plus something. But if you take a look at all three of these terms, we learned something in the previous section where we factored out the GCF. So when you're working out these problems, always take a look and see if you have a GCF first. So what's a term that can go into all three of these terms? What's the biggest term that can go into all of them? Well, if you take a look at your coefficients, I know that 2 goes into each one of these. And now since all of them have an x in common, I could take out an x as well. So we could factor out a GCF first. We have 2x. And now we're left with x squared minus x. We have minus 42. And now what we have to do is factor out what's inside the parentheses, because now we have a trinomial in that form. Okay, so now we need factors of negative 42. And then the sum has to be equal to negative 1. So I need two numbers that multiply to give me negative 42 and add up to negative 1. Okay. Well, I could use, let's say, negative 6 and positive 7. So first, in order for you to multiply two numbers and it gives you a negative result, one of them has to be positive and one of them has to be negative. So I can try out negative 6 and positive 7. But now if I add those together, it gives me positive 1. Okay, well, let's just try to switch that around. Let's say positive 6 and negative 7. When I multiply those together, that gives me negative 42. And now when I add them together, it gives me negative 1. So now I could factor out what's inside the parentheses. So this becomes x plus 6 and x minus 7. And then when you're writing out your final solution, don't forget about the GCF we factored out in the beginning. So now this is our trinomial completely factored out. We have 2x times x plus 6 times x minus 7. Next problem, we have x squared plus x minus 5. So we need factors of negative 5. So two numbers that multiply and give us negative 5. And then the sum has to be equal to positive 1. Okay. Well, the only two numbers that multiply and give you 5 are 1 and 5. And since it has to be negative 5, one of those has to be negative. So we could try negative 1 and 5. But if I add those together, it gives me 4. I could try positive 1 and negative 5. But that gives me negative 4 if I add them. And now there isn't any other numbers that multiply to negative 5. Okay, so in both of these cases, we don't end up with the right combination because none of them add up to 1. So in this particular case, this trinomial, this is prime. This cannot be factored. So you could put prime, or you could put can't be factored. So not every trinomial you'll be able to factor out. So once you exhaust your options, once you try out every possibility, and if you don't end up with the right combination, then it's a prime trinomial. Let's take a look at another problem. This one a little bit different because now we have two variables. We have an x and a y. Now what I'm going to do here to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to get rid of my second variable. I'm going to get rid of that y. I'm going to rewrite this as x squared minus 5x plus 6. When I rewrite it into this form, now this is something that we've seen before. So let's go ahead. Factors of 6. And the sum has to be equal to negative 5. So two numbers that multiply give us positive 6 and add up to negative 5. Now, the only way that you could multiply two numbers to give you a positive, and when you add them together, it gives you a negative, both the factors have to be negative. So I could use negative 2 and negative 3. So negative 2 times negative 3 gives me positive 6. If I add them together, I get negative 5. So in this particular problem, when I don't have any y's in the problem, this factors into x minus 2 and x minus 3. Now, what are we going to do with our y's? Because remember, our original problem had y's in it. What you're going to do in this case, add the y to the second term. So you have x minus 2y and x minus 3y. And that gives us our solution. Okay, so it's a little trick that you can use. You could get rid of that second variable and then attach it at the end. Okay, so I believe we have a couple more problems. Let's take a look at this next one. Factor. Now we have x to the 4th minus 9x squared plus 14. Okay, so let's take a look. So now we have factors of 14. So two numbers that multiply to give you 14. And then the sum has to be equal to negative 9. So once again, we end up with that situation. We need two numbers that multiply to give us a positive, and when you add them, it has to give you a negative. Only way that's possible is if both of your factors are negative. So we could try negative 2 and negative 7. Indeed, if I add those together, it gives me negative 9. But now since we have this x to the 4th, the way that we're going to write out our result, we're going to put x squared minus 2 and x squared minus 7. Because when you multiply these first two terms together, it has to give you this first term right here. It has to give you x to the 4th. And if you'd like to check your answer, remember, you could always multiply that back out and then make sure you end up with the same thing you started off with. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so take your x squared, distribute it out. So x squared times x squared gives me x to the 4th. X squared times negative 7 gives me negative 7x squared. Take the negative 2 and distribute this out. Negative 2 times x squared, I get negative 2x squared. Negative 2 times negative 7 gives me positive 14. If I combine like terms, I get x to the 4th minus 9x squared plus 14, which is exactly the same thing I started off with. Now, one last problem. Okay, so we have negative x squared plus 8x minus 16. Now, whenever you're factoring out, you want this first term to be positive. Okay, it makes your life a whole lot easier. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to factor out a negative from there. So I'm going to take out like a negative 1. So if I factor out this negative, I'm left with positive x squared minus 8x and plus 16. And now I could go ahead and work it out the same way. I need two numbers that multiply to give me 16 and then add up to negative 8. So I'm looking for factors of 16, and the sum has to be equal to negative 8. So same case again, two numbers that multiply to give you a positive and then add up to a negative. Both your factors have to be negative. So you could try negative 2 and negative 8, but this gives me negative 10, which is not what I'm looking for. I can also try negative 4 and negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 4 gives me positive 16. If I add them, it gives me negative 8, which is exactly what I'm looking for here. So this is going to factor into x minus 4 times x minus 4. But just remember, don't forget about that negative we factored out in the beginning. You're going to have to include that into your answer. So we have negative and then x minus 4 times x minus 4. Or another way that you can write this out, since you have the same factor twice, this would be negative and then x minus 4 squared. Okay. So that was it for this section. If you have any questions, don't hesitate, just email me.